Khund, who was a close associate of the Taliban's late founder. The acting interior minister is to be Sirajuddin Haqqani, whose organization is on a US terrorism list and who is one of the FBI's most wanted men. Abdul Ghani Baradar is appointed deputy prime minister, which took some people by surprise, as there had been speculation that the man responsible for negotiating with the US would be given the top job. Well, the Taliban have repeatedly tried to reassure Afghans and the international community that they have changed since they last ruled the country 2 decades ago. Well, here's the Taliban spokesperson.
The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan has decided on a cabinet to be constituted to take care of government affairs. There will be a department which will overlook the functions of the government. Some ministries are yet to be finalized. The deserving candidates will be sought and appointed.
A Taliban spokesperson there. Well, for more analysis, we can speak now to Afghan journalist Bilal Sawari. Thank you so much for joining us, Bilal. What do you make of this new Afghan government lineup?
Well, it is not an inclusive government. There's no role for women, and there's no role for non-Taliban. In fact, the appointment of Mullah Hassan Khund is a compromise candidate's appointment, because we know that there were differences within the Taliban leadership about the leadership role. So we will have to see how the Taliban now can move ahead and keep Afghanistan functional. We have to remember all state institutions crumbled. There's no sign of ANDSF. There's no sign of, the civil servants. There's no sign of finance ministry, the central bank. The country is bankrupt. And this will also do little to convince the international community to continue recognizing the Taliban as a government, and perhaps future funding could also not be available. And some of those who are appointed into very key security portfolios are people who have clear links with Al-Qaeda and other foreign militant groups, transnational jihadi groups across the region and in some parts of the world as well. So this is also a worrying sign for the United States and international community. Specifically, the Taliban have gone back to the 1990s and declared the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, and Mullah Hibatullah Khundzada have declared himself as the commander of the faithful, just like Mullah Omar had done.
Yeah, and of course the country faces economic meltdown, and I mean a lot of people will be wondering if, they have in this government and eventually when it's a complete lineup, the know-how that's necessary to steer the country towards a rather brighter future. I mean, presumably, I think I know the answer to this question, but do they have what it takes?
They are lacking expertise and capacity that was there over the last 20 years. If you take up the case of central bank and the Ministry of Finance, the Afghan economy is basically literally collapsed. So how can fighters and Taliban leaders and commanders who've known fighting come now and revive the Afghan economy, for example? They will also need people who could deal with the World Bank, IMF, and the international community. But what is more crucial here, that the Taliban are inheriting an Afghanistan that is very different than the one that they ruled. We see with demonstrations in Kabul, that the Taliban fighters simply failed to bring some sort of calm on the streets of Kabul. And every time they face a demonstration, especially Afghan women, they continue to fire into the air and also into the ground, often killing and wounding demonstrators. So the world is watching, the Afghan people are watching, and the neighborhood, some of those countries are horrified by this announcement, because for them it will be the fear of foreign fighters, especially from Central Asian region, who have had a presence among Taliban filing ranks.
Yeah, just mentioning those protests in Kabul and elsewhere across the country, quite a lot of calls from different directions for people in Afghanistan to rise up against the new leaders. Do you see that movement gaining momentum? And just a side question, at one of the protests there were people chanting death to Pakistan. And I'm just wondering why so much anger is directed at that country.
Well, we will have to see, how the Taliban can assure the Afghan residents about their independence, because the Pakistani intelligence chief was visiting Kabul and so visibly, and Pakistan's role over the last 20 years has always been attached to suicide truck bombs, military-grade explosives. Pakistan has harbored Taliban leadership inside, major Pakistani cities. So there is that mistrust based on the last 20 years. And, to have Afghan women come out to the streets and face the Taliban with their guns, I think is also, uh, a shocking message to Afghan leaders and a lot of these officials who basically literally fled. And at the end of the day, it's the Afghan women who've suffered over the decades in this country, standing up for rights, which, they continue to fight for.